Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Breast Cancer Physio. I'm your host Jen McKenzie, lymphedema physiotherapist and ESSA accredited exercise physiologist. In this episode I'm going to be talking to you about one of my all-time favourite stretches that I believe all breast cancer survivors should be doing on a semi-regular basis. And the reason this exercise is so important is for rib cage mobility. Now, a lot of people will be conscious that they get back pain, that they might have reduced range of shoulder mobility, they might even have difficulty taking a deep breath. And one of the best pieces of equipment that you can invest in is one of these guys, which is a foam roller. Now, I'll put a link in the description bar below as to where you can get these from, but ultimately they're pretty cheap. They're very, very effective. You can use them at home, and hopefully this video is going to show you how to do that. So if you enjoy this content and you would like to see more, then please subscribe to my channel, which is completely free. Give this video a big thumbs up and leave a comment in the section below if you have any questions around foam rollers or any other questions around breast cancer in general. So first of all, what are we trying to achieve here? So I'm just going to put this down for a second because I want to talk about posture for a couple of minutes. So when you've been through breast cancer, one of the really common problems that occurs is poor posture following the completion of treatment. Now, what I mean by poor posture is if you slump, we essentially collapse under our rib cage and we can end up sitting in a slumped position, so we can really lose our posture just underneath our rib cage. Instead of having a nice curve through our low back and being nice and open and up through the chest, we can tend to collapse through this curve here, so we lose the curve and then we slump under the rib cage. But ultimately also that means we get quite stiff between our shoulder blades, and it also can mean we lose range of motion at the shoulder, because as soon as we're sitting in this posture, look what happens to my range of motion at my shoulder. I might demonstrate this on the shoulder that's on the near side to the camera. So if I'm slumped, I only can get my shoulder to here. If I sit upright, then I can lift my shoulder all the way up. So the only thing that's changed between those two positions is my ability to extend through my upper back, which is also known as your thoracic spine. Now, the reason we use the foam roller on a regular basis is to improve the mobility of your rib cage and your thoracic spine. In my physio clinic, I'm also using it to treat neck-related issues, sometimes even headaches, but particularly shoulder restriction. So before we get into using this, I also want to make mention of the fact that when you've had a lumpectomy or a mastectomy or even breast reconstruction, your subconscious mind is ultimately going to try and protect this region because it's an area that's had ultimately trauma to it. There's probably emotional involvement there because there was tumours in that region. So what's our brain going to do? We're ultimately going to protect this area of our body. How do we do that? We bring our shoulder forward. So often this is another reason why posture can really get affected after breast cancer treatment, because whether it is conscious or subconscious, our shoulder is going to position itself to protect the breast or the chest wall. So this is where a lot of problems can start in the shoulder. The pectoralis muscle, which is in the front here, can get short and tight. And then I've also done videos on how much this area of the shoulder can get affected. So I'm just going to leave a little card here, guys, if you want to go and check out that video on how you can improve shoulder mobility just by getting this section of your shoulder released. Just go and have a look at that video as well. There's another really simple treatment technique that you can do at home to help your shoulder range of motion by attacking the flexibility through here. In this video though, we're really focusing on ribcage mobility because, like I said at the start of this session, if we can have a good extension through our upper back and mobility through our ribcage, it's going to help our ability to move our shoulders, to have good posture, to take a deep breath, and also to rotate through our trunk. Those are four really, really important functional activities that we have to do most days of the week. So if that's not happening, then this is where the foam roller can come in really handy. Now, one of the other things I should briefly mention is that if you have low bone mineral density, just be cautious with this exercise. These foam rollers are quite dense, particularly when you first purchase them, and I would hate for anyone with really, really low bone mineral density to try this and fracture a rib. So just be aware that if you have really low bone mineral density, that this does involve putting some pressure on the rib cage and the thoracic spine. So if you're not sure whether you should be using a foam roller, then it's best to consult your medical team and a physiotherapist that's trained in breast cancer. So just keep that one in mind. I just wanted to add a little note here as well, guys, that this is an exercise that I wouldn't recommend doing in the first 4 weeks as a minimum after surgery, because as you can imagine, you will have wounds that are still healing and tissue that's trying to knit itself together. So particularly because this is an exercise where, ultimately you can really open up through your underarm or axillary region. If you've had breast reconstruction surgery, you might have scars around the breast, under the breast. So just be quite cautious of doing this too soon after surgical intervention. Again, if you've got any doubts, please discuss this exercise directly with your breast surgeon or your medical team, and just make sure you've got clearance to do the exercise before you start. There are different versions of foam rollers. I'm not so much worried about the length of the foam roller, but more the circumference of the foam roller, or more so the diameter of the foam roller. So the height from here to here is important, because essentially what you'll see me do is use this device like a fulcrum point for my back. So as I described before, we tend to collapse under the rib cage, so we'll tend to collapse here, which causes a slump between our shoulder blades, and we're ultimately going to use this device as a fulcrum point to extend our back over the top of it. Now, I'll just explain that there's another version of the foam roller, which essentially is like a half version. You can see the difference in the heights. This might look nicer, but I can reassure you that it's actually firmer on your back in a lot of ways, because there's no ability to roll this one, whereas this one can actually be a little bit more forgiving because it can roll. While we're on the topic of variations though, if this particular foam roller is too dense for you to use, so if it's too firm on your back, if it's making you feel really uncomfortable when you first start using it, another option is to roll up a couple of beach towels, so they're quite thick, and then you often will find that you can tolerate the movement that I'm about to show you a lot easier, and then you can usually graduate up to this foam roller. So without further ado, let's demonstrate how we use this foam roller. There's actually 2 sort of sub movements that I'm going to show you how to perform. And honestly, this is, despite the fact that I haven't had breast cancer myself, this is honestly one of the best little stretching exercises that I do almost every day, particularly if you're starting to feel yourself getting a little bit stiff between your shoulder blades, or if you're getting a little bit of a sore back between your shoulder blades. It's amazing how quickly this can relieve the stiffness out of your spine. Before we do it as well, I should just quickly mention that we're really using this to improve flexibility of the skeleton. So we're looking at the rib cage and the upper back. I'm not really using this for the purpose of releasing muscle tension. If I was looking at releasing muscle tension, I'd probably be using a massage ball, tennis ball, hockey ball, and getting up against a wall. This surface area is quite broad, and sometimes that just doesn't really make, I find, the biggest impact on muscle tension. So this is really skeletal tension or stiffness release. So let's have a look at how we do this exercise. So what I'm going to do first, guys, is I'm going to position the foam roller behind me. This is probably the trickiest bit of the exercise, particularly if you are a little bit stiff in your shoulder range of motion. So if you've got anyone around at home that can help you set it up, if you are a little bit restricted in your range, I would suggest that you get them to help you. I'm obviously doing this on top of my treatment bed, but you can certainly do it on the floor. Just take care with getting on and off the floor if you're still recovering from breast cancer, particularly if you have any balance or strength issues. So first we position this behind you, and ultimately I'm going to aim for this to be over the top of my shoulder blades. So I'm just going to lower myself down, and once I'm here, I'm going to position my hands behind my head. Now if you don't have the shoulder range of motion to get all the way back here, a little trick is to interlock your fingers, put them behind your neck, and then you can perform this exercise. So you don't necessarily have to have that range of motion in your shoulder to do this exercise effectively. If you put your hands behind your head though, that is ideally where we want you, but you can certainly start here. So if you can adopt this position with your hands behind your head, the next thing to make sure of is that your hips stay on the ground. The second part of this exercise, I'm going to show you what we do when your hips come off the ground, but for the first part, we're going to keep your hips on the ground, and from here we're just going to lean back over the foam roller and extend as far as we can. Now when you first do this exercise, you may find that you only go a very short distance, and then you might even get the feeling that you're winded, and that's actually a good sign as far as I'm concerned. It means you're probably doing the right exercise to improve your range of motion. So all I do is I lean back, and I might stay here for 10-15 seconds. Once I'm happy that I've been there for a little while, I can shift a little bit up or a little bit down, and then I can extend again. So I'm just going a little bit above and a little bit below where my shoulder blades are, and I'm just going back into that position of extension. I'd also like to make a quick mention here, guys, that if you get any clicks or cracks in your back while you're doing this exercise, typically that's going to be a really good thing. The noise that you're hearing is carbon dioxide bubbles popping. It's not bones moving back into place. It is carbon dioxide gas bubbles popping, which is like the same noise that you get when you're cracking your knuckles. Like I said earlier, please double check with your medical team if you have any concerns about bone stock integrity. So if you're really low on bone mineral density and you're osteoporotic, or you're very frail and you're really not sure whether your thoracic spine and rib cage is going to sustain the pressure from this, please check with your medical team before you do this exercise. But otherwise, if you do hear clicks and cracks, it's not you breaking a rib, it is literally just the stiffness releasing out of your back. And often when I do this exercise, I can get 4, 5 or 6 cracks out of my back. It does certainly make my back feel looser. So now I'm going to demonstrate the second version of this exercise where we do lift the hips off the bed. So this is called the rolling pin version of this exercise. So let's get into it now. So again, I'm going to set up in exactly the same way I did for the first exercise. I'm going to have my hands behind my head if I can. Like I said, this is still, there's still an opportunity to put your hands interlocked behind your neck if you don't have the shoulder range of motion. So hands behind your head, and then I'm going to lift my hips up and use this like a rolling pin. And this is often where I'll get clicks and cracks out of my back. I usually only have to do this for 5 or 6 seconds. I'll roll a little bit up and down my rib cage, and then I'm essentially done. So that's how you perform the exercises. I will often perform the extension version like I showed you in the first version first, and then I will carry on while I'm down there, lift my hips up and then use it like a rolling pin. And it's a fantastic way to get more mobility in your rib cage and your upper back. So if you have any questions about how to do this exercise, then please leave a comment in the section below. But ultimately, I think that because of the nature of breast cancer treatment, even coming down to the fact that because we get deconditioned through breast cancer treatment and you lose a lot of muscle mass, you can be down on energy levels, that can also influence your posture. And if your posture is influenced in a bad way, it typically means you're going to be in a more slumped or flexed position, and that can ultimately lead to a stiff rib cage as well. So there's lots of reasons to do this exercise after breast cancer treatment. You can do it during breast cancer treatment as long as you're cleared by your medical team, but this is honestly one of my most favourite exercises for so many reasons, but I really think it's very applicable to breast cancer survivors because of this natural tendency to subconsciously protect the breast or the chest wall after lumpectomy, mastectomy or breast reconstruction. So go and have a go of that, guys, and let me know what you think. Remember that there are going to be links to where you can purchase this piece of equipment in the description bar of this video. So let me know how you go, and I hope you enjoy this exercise. I'm Jen McKenzie, the Breast Cancer Physio, and I will see you next time.